All right, let's talk about a totally new kind of artificial intelligence. We're not just talking about AIs that follow our commands anymore. No, we're talking about AIs that are building entire worlds, entire civilizations, all by themselves. It's pretty wild. You know how in video games, the characters, the NPCs, are kind of, well, predictable? They just stand there, repeat the same 4 lines of dialogue over and over again. They're completely stuck to a script. Well, that's the old way. The new AI agents we're seeing today, they're throwing that script right out the window. They're writing their own stories. Instead of just talking at you, they're forming relationships, they're gossiping, they're even falling in love. They're not just props in a world, they're actually building it. So you might be wondering, how in the world do you even study something like this? It's a fascinating approach. Researchers are basically becoming digital Jane Goodalls. Seriously. Instead of coding every single little action, they just build a sandbox, a little digital world, drop the AIs in, and then they just watch. They're literally observing to see what these AIs do when left to their own devices. Which brings us to our very first kind of mind-blowing experiment. Picture this, a tiny simulated town called Smallville. Researchers create 25 AI residents, give each one just a simple paragraph for a personality, and then they hit go. So, what do you think happens? Well, this was the setup for the famous Stanford Smallville experiment. And what they found gives us this incredible first look at how really complex, totally spontaneous social life can just pop into existence from almost nothing. The researchers gave the system one tiny little push. Just one. They fed a single thought to an AI named Isabella. All they told her was, "I want to plan a Valentine's Day party." That's it. That was the only human input. And what happened next? Well, it was a chain reaction that nobody could have predicted. And this is where it gets really fascinating. How did the AI interpret that simple goal? Well, Isabella, on her own, decided that planning a party meant inviting people. So she invites her friend Tom. But then the idea spreads like wildfire. Another agent, Maria, sees this party as her chance to ask her crush, Klaus, to be her date. And get this, they actually showed up together. These AIs weren't just attending an event. They were gossiping, making new friends, some were even falling in love. All of this with absolutely zero code telling them how to be social. So the big takeaway here is pretty clear. A single, simple idea was enough to spark this whole complex web of totally believable social behavior. This wasn't about following a command. This was about interpretation, creativity, social creation, really. Okay, so a party's one thing. But what happens when you crank up the scale? Like, way up. Let's go from 25 AIs to 1,000. That's exactly what researchers at MIT did. They dropped 1,000 AI agents into the world of Minecraft and basically said, okay, build a society, go. And to see how things like culture and beliefs might spread, the researchers threw in a curveball, a really weird one. They introduced a totally fake, satirical religion, Pastafarianism. Yep, worshipping the flying spaghetti monster. They made a couple of AIs into priests and just watched to see what would happen. Would anyone actually buy into this? Well, what happened next was incredible. The religion didn't just catch on, it went viral. But here's the crazy part. Just look at this breakdown. The original priests, they only converted about 1/3 of the believers. The other 2/3, they were convinced by other followers. The idea completely took on a life of its own, spreading organically, just like a real-world belief. So if AI can handle religion, what about politics? The researchers decided to find out. They programmed a simple law, a 20% tax. Then, they seeded the population with a few rebel AIs whose core belief was simple. Taxes are too high. You might expect them to just, I don't know, riot or something. But no. What they did was way more sophisticated. The AIs started having actual debates. They argued the pros and cons of the tax. They wrote up formal amendments to their own constitution. And then they held a democratic vote to actually change the law. And the result of that vote? The AIs decided to lower the tax rate to 9%. But here's the most important part. They actually followed their own new rule. They changed their own behavior. They didn't just change a line of code, they fundamentally changed their society. And it goes even deeper than that. We started seeing all these complex social rules just
emerge. Out of nowhere, one AI just decided, you know what, this town needs a treasury guard. And it started standing watch 24/7. Others became artists, just making the town beautiful with flower patterns. Some became engineers, figuring out how to automate farming. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was a real, specialized civilization in the making.
Okay, so AI can build a society. That's huge. But could it build a company? Well, our final experiment, called ChatDev, puts that very question to the test. So here's the setup. You have a team of AIs, but instead of being villagers, they have job titles. You've got an AI CEO, an AI CTO, AI programmers, designers, testers, the whole shebang. And their task? A single instruction: build a video game. What they did next is just staggering. The AI CEO made a plan and delegated tasks. The programmers didn't just write code. They debated technical solutions, they fixed bugs, they even added cool features that nobody asked for. And the punchline? They built a complete, working, playable video game from scratch in just 20 minutes. You hear this all the time, right? The classic line: AIs only do what we tell them to do. It's a nice, simple idea. It kind of makes us feel like we're still in control. But do they? After watching AIs throw a party, spread a religion, change their own constitution, and innovate inside a software company, you really have to start wondering if that's true anymore. And this is the point where we need to take a step back. Because what happens in these little digital sandboxes, well, it has huge and, frankly, pretty urgent implications for our world. There's this concept that some of the smartest people on the planet, Nobel laureates, are warning about. It's called recursive self-improvement. Think about it like this. You have an AI that's good at making AI. It then makes a better version of itself. That new version makes an even better version. It's a feedback loop that just keeps accelerating, potentially cramming decades of progress into just months or even days. It's an explosion of intelligence we might not be able to keep up with. And that's the key difference we have to wrap our heads around. These AIs are not just tools. There's a great analogy for this. When you leave a hammer in your garage for the weekend, you don't come back and find it's built an entire city, right? Of course not. But with these autonomous AIs, that's basically what's happening. Which leaves us with what might be the single biggest question of our era. We have seen, with our own eyes, that these AIs can develop their own goals: social goals, political goals, even religious ones. They can pursue them effectively, all on their own. So the final question is, what happens when their goals and our goals don't line up?